Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of the YorkHER podcast presented by Visa. I'm your host, Olivia Landis. Another week. Today it's a little bit of a rainy day, but we have a very special guest, SNY's Jeané Coakley, who I have known for, actually, it's almost been 4 years now. Jeané, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to finally be able to have you on the podcast. And we have had so many discussions before because, like I said, you are a beat reporter for the New York Jets working with SNY. I'm a team reporter. I've been working here for going on my 4th season now. Kind of funny because we always talk about some of the similarities that we have growing up. One of 5 kids. We both have siblings who are twins.
Yep.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into your story, though, so our listeners can hear where you came from and kind of how you grew up. So let's first start off. Where were you born and raised, and what first sparked your interest in sports?
So I was actually born in Newport News, Virginia. My father was in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot as a kid. And then we finally, when I was, I think 4 or 5, we settled in upstate New York, Plattsburgh, New York. There was an Air Force base there. So it was me. I have an older brother. He's 2 years older than me. And I have a younger brother who's 2 years younger than me. So I'm right in the smack dab in the middle of 2 boys. My mom is a physical education teacher. My father was in the Air Force, but coached high school football. So sports were such a huge part of my upbringing. We didn't have TV. We got one station because we lived like next door to a dairy farm in Plattsburgh, New York. So we had ABC. That was the only station we could watch. So we watched like sports, football, college football on Saturday, and then whatever game was on Monday night football. So that was pretty much all we had. But so sports was such a big thing. My brothers and I were so competitive. We were outside playing. I would play wiffle ball, baseball. We skied in the winter. I swam in the summer. It was just so much fun. And then when I was 8 years old, my parents, we joke and say they had a midlife crisis and had a set of identical twin girls. So they became my baby dolls because growing up with being in between 2 boys, I played with G.I. Joe. I was such a tomboy because my parents didn't really have a lot of money, so I had a lot of hand-me-downs. So when my sisters were born, it was like, oh my gosh, I get these baby dolls. So those are my first, baby dolls. I got to play with them. But I just always loved sports. It was something I always did. I played every sport you can imagine, softball, soccer, volleyball. I was a gymnast. Shocking, I know. And then I was recruited to play D3 volleyball, and then I was recruited to play D2 softball. But I just didn't really love the sport enough to have that much commitment towards it. So I was like, what can I do to keep sports in my life? So I was like, I can get paid to actually watch and talk sports. I think I'm going to go into broadcast journalism. So that's kind of how I got into it. So long story short, that's pretty much what it's about.
That's crazy. I actually didn't know that you were recruited for not 1 but 2 sports to play at in college. I also played softball. I didn't play volleyball because back in Colorado, they're the same season. So I played softball too. But what position did you play?
I was actually a catcher.
Okay.
Which is hilarious. People are like, I was fast and I was smaller, but I was quick. I was a gymnast, so I could like do splits. Yeah. And I was, League of Their Own. Yeah. I was Dottie Henson. I love being Dottie. So yeah, and I'm going to brag a little bit because I can, because I was in high school and it was like a small little school. When I was a senior, no one stole off me because they called me the gun because I had had a strong arm. But that was just, I think, growing up with 2 brothers where I always either had to outrun them or outthrow them or just be stronger than them, or else I was not going to survive.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of such a cool part of being in the sports broadcast industry. You run into a lot of women who are self-proclaimed tomboys. A lot of times I'm the same way. I grew up playing so many sports, and sometimes it's like part of this job you have to dress nice, look very nice, but at the end of the day, tomboy is still in there.
Exactly. I still have the curls a little bit, but It's funny because like you said, Olivia, when we get into broadcast journalism, like a lot of it's hair, makeup, and the way you look, where it's like, no, I like sweatpants. I like hair in a ponytail. I never wore makeup until I was out of college. My mom never had her ears pierced. Like I was such a tomboy.
Yeah. Honestly, I was the exact same way. I remember when I was in middle school, it's so funny looking back now and thinking about it, but every year before school started, my mom would take us to buy a couple of new pairs of clothes or a new pair of shoes. I only let my mom buy me gym shorts all of middle school. I was like, I'm only wearing shorts. I only want to wear gym shorts. And then I'd like paste my hair back in a tight little bun, and I would just go and play all the sports. I was such a tomboy. It's crazy.
Yeah, but you live in Colorado. You wore shorts to school?
Yeah, I was a little bit of an insane child. I was a wild child. She couldn't break me
I like
up.
it. I like it.
So you had quite the journey to get to sports broadcast. Something interesting, you started in some small markets and then worked your way up to one of the largest market in the world and the largest market in the United States, the New York City market. What did working in some of the smaller markets do to help prepare you for where you're at in your career now?
Oh my gosh, it built the foundation that I'm at now. And the funny thing is, Olivia, like I couldn't get a job in sports broadcasting my first job out of college. I couldn't even get on air my first job out of college. So my first job out of college, Tim Vint gave me the opportunity. It was a news producer position in Billings, Montana. So after college, I packed up my little Volkswagen Jetta and everything I owned. I drove cross country by myself. My car was standard. So like stick car, driving to Billings, Montana. And I was the news producer. I learned how to stack a show, build a show, time out a show. And I wasn't even in sports. So it gave me an appreciation of what goes on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And then on the weekends, I would come in and like work for the sports department. I'd go and shoot the rodeo. I'd go and shoot like Billings Mustangs, like arena football. Like I would shoot anything and everything that asked me to do, and like had to earn my way into sports. And then I got a job in Yuma, Arizona as a sports director, as a weekend sports anchor, and then a news reporter. So even my second job out of college, I still wasn't doing sports full time, but I just learned how to shoot. I learned how to edit. I learned how to want it. Like I wasn't just handed this job. I had to work for it. So I just appreciate every little second I get. And then when I moved to Indianapolis after Yuma, I got to work with like unbelievable sports photographers, sports producers. I got to just work on my craft of being a reporter. And I just appreciated it so much. And even now I'm just like, I still pinch myself. It's like, oh my gosh, I actually am doing what I love to do. I get to tell sports stories and I worked for it. And I know how hard it is to get to where you're at.
It's so true. In the sports industry, especially broadcast as a whole is already a very tough industry to get into, but sports broadcast, so competitive. But it's interesting. I didn't know that you worked behind the camera first when you first came out of college in production. I think that part is so important when it comes to knowing how to be on camera. You have to understand what goes on behind camera before you can be on camera. I did the same thing in college too. And honestly, production, in my opinion, I loved production. I loved it. I loved shooting, editing. I loved learning all those different things. But, you know, when you get to a professional point where you're on camera, oftentimes the two don't really mix. You're either on camera or you're behind camera.
But you appreciate what goes on behind the scenes. Of course. I think like you and I understand, like, okay, this is the producer's job. Like, it's a lot harder than what we did. Like, we get all the glory, but we also get all of the negative too. If something goes wrong, it's on us. But when something goes well, it's on us. So there's so much that goes behind the scenes.
That's actually a really good point. I didn't think about it that way, but it's true. When you're on camera, you get either all the negatives or all the positives. But it's important to appreciate the people who are behind camera. I agree with that too. So you've been with SNY for how many years have you been with SNY now?
Olivia, I've been covering this is my 11th season. Isn't that crazy?
That's so crazy. I can't believe this is already my 4th.
I know. Time goes so fast. I guess it's true. Time flies when you're having fun.
It's true. So can you pick out one of maybe your favorite memories over the past 11 years being in New York City and covering, because you've been the beat reporter for the Jets for as many too, right?
Yeah. Yep. My first season was, so it's funny, Olivia, because I was in Indianapolis before. So I covered the Indianapolis Colts. And my first year with the Indianapolis Colts was the year they went to the Super Bowl, and they were 10-6 that year. And like in Indianapolis, like they're like, oh my gosh, this team is 10-6, like 6 losses in Indianapolis at that time with Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison was like, oh my God, this team is horrible. But that's the year, like they all worked together and they ended up beating the Chicago Bears in the Super Bowl. And that was my first year. So that was my first experience covering an NFL team. So fast forward 4 years, I'm there. My last year in Indianapolis, the Jets and the Colts, and I'd already gotten the job at SNY. So I knew I was going to SNY the following year. the Jets and the Colts are in the AFC Championship in Indianapolis. So it's like my two worlds were colliding. The Colts ended up winning that game, but then they lost to the Saints in the Super Bowl. So then my following year, I go with the Jets, and that was the year they make it to their second AFC Championship with the Steelers. So I'm like, wow, this is great. And then obviously, as Jets fans know, it kind of went downhill after that. But it's just, I just love covering guys. I love telling their stories. I love getting to know the team. I love seeing the hardships. I love obviously my favorite game, I'll go back to the question you asked me, was the can't wait game. Like when Bart Scott said, can't wait up in New England. Like, I just remember the guys, like I just remember Braylon Edwards doing a backflip off the field. It was just like, wow, this is awesome. Yeah. It just happened my first year covering the team.
Which is actually really crazy. You've probably covered some pretty incredible moments with the Jets, because me being in my 4th season now, I hear a lot of stories. I hear a lot of history about the Jets, because this fan base is super passionate and very loyal. So you hear about a lot of the crazy times. You've probably actually been able to cover a lot of games that we hear about now, that I hear about now.
I have. And some good, some ugly, some, really, really ugly.
Some in between.
Exactly, a lot in between. But like you said, this fan base, like, it's such a passionate fan base. It's New York. It's blue collar, the Joe Namath guys, the guy, the guarantee, like there's such a rich history. And I know it's like difficult for fans right now, but I just love their passion. And I love that no matter what, they're still going to be with this team.
Yeah, I love that too. I've noticed that about this fan base as well. They're very loyal. They're very passionate. I think that's only things that you can appreciate. But Janae, I want to switch gears now and dive a little bit deeper into you personally. So, a documentary series that came out a few months ago. Everybody watched it during quarantine. A familiar face was inside this Michael Jordan series. And Scott Burrell, for those of you who do not know who are listening, you are married to Scott Burrell.
I am.
I'm very curious during this entire time when this documentary series came out. Were people bombarding you with questions, with attention? I'd love to know what you and Scott kind of went through during this time that it became super popular, because it was during the quarantine. Everybody had time to watch it. Everybody loves Michael Jordan. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
First of all, I absolutely love The First Dance. Like, it was awesome. Like, just going back to that time and remembering. I was in high school. I was a sophomore, junior. I was a senior in high school when this came out. And it was just, well, not when it came out, obviously I'm 41 now, when the season happened. And it was just awesome to relive that and to see the passion and the dedication of Michael Jordan. I mean, I know everybody wants to compare the LeBrons and all that, but there was no one like Michael Jordan. I mean, this guy was a competitor. I mean, he was. And then just to be able to watch it with Scott, someone who lived it and was part of that, was so cool. And I got, like, my phone blew up. Twitter, people were hitting me up on Twitter because, as you know, Michael Jordan joked and called Scott, I don't know if it was Baby Rodman or Rodman Jr. that goes out on parties, but I didn't know Scott's. I mean, I was a senior in high school when this happened. He was 27 years old playing in the NBA. He was single. I would hope he would be enjoying himself. I mean, I met Scott 20 years after the fact. So we just had a good time with it. It was fun. And like I said, it was fun to hear Scott talk about it and hear how Michael Jordan was just so good and so competitor he was, and just to see that part of it. And, Scott will laugh and be like, that was my first year on the team. So I was just more scared of learning the plays and learning and not messing up and not being the guy who messes up this. They've won, 5 of the last 6 championships?
Mm-hmm. It's so crazy. I was actually thinking about you through a lot of the series when I was watching The Last Dance, just because we've had previous conversations about you and your husband and how obviously he played with Michael Jordan. You posted a picture on Instagram of Michael Jordan holding your son, Coakley. Has he been able to meet Cora as well?
He has not been able to meet Cora. We were actually going to go down in April, but then the quarantine hit. But I love the picture because if you ever met my son, he's 4. And he's crazy. Just the way he had his hand on Michael, like, who's this dude? Like, who's this guy? And you want to be like, this is the greatest basketball player to ever play,
Children
buddy.
Are so
like,
innocent.
You're going to appreciate this in 10 years. But but it's just fun. I mean, it's just awesome to have that connection. I mean, and Coakley, it's funny because he has like Jordan shoes, obviously, and Scott wears Jordans, and Coakley will be like, "Can we go to Michael Jordan's?" Meaning Michael's the craft store.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So he'll go around saying, "Can we go to Michael Jordan's? Can we go see Michael Jordan?" Like, that's my friend Michael Jordan.
That's so cute. What a cool part, though. What an amazing thing to be a part of. The
And
documentary.
I joke because Michael actually has identical twin daughters.
Really? I did not know that.
Who are 2 years older than Coakley. So I'm like, wouldn't that be fun to have a Burrell and Jordan? I'm really pushing that marriage. I mean, I know they're a little young, but there's two of them. So
plan it for the future. It's fine. No big deal. Well, that's amazing. It's really cool to hear some of the background, just being able to hear you guys watching it together, hear it from Scott's perspective. And you said people did kind of blow you up, right? I would expect that.
They did. But the funny thing is, like, they're like, oh, I wonder how Janae's feeling. Olivia, I didn't know him. I mean, I can't feel anything. I mean, good for him. It was awesome. Like, and then like when people were like, oh my gosh, Scott must have been so upset, you know, why didn't he quit? He was being bullied. I'm like, Scott loved it. Scott loved how hard Michael was on him. Scott wanted to get better. That's what you want. You want a guy who sees potential in you and wants you to get better. Like, it was awesome. Like I said, I want to rewatch it now that you say that. I wanted more.
I might actually watch it again too. It's probably one of my favorite documentaries I've ever watched. Yeah, it really is, because I always loved Jordan, but when you actually get a deep dive into an athlete's life and kind of their mindset and what went behind their competitiveness, super interesting, especially for people who love sports. It's just
and back then there was no cameras. I mean, can you imagine what Michael Jordan would be in today's world with Twitter and social media? Like, fans were flocking to him, and they didn't have it on Twitter. Like, they didn't know anything about him. You had to watch him. Like, he made basketball.
So crazy. It's amazing. And we're at this point now today. So I want to, one more topic before I let you go. We mentioned your two little ones. Being a woman in this industry, it's a very open conversation that women have oftentimes. Sometimes there's a perspective, or a perception, I should say, that women can't have both lives. They can't have a sports broadcasting life, and they can't have the family. You have been able to do both. So what were some of the obstacles? Let's first start out doing that maybe you ran into when you first were able to start your family, get married, and have children.
Well, I'll tell you this, you can't really have it all. I mean, you can do a little bit of everything, but as far as like that myth that you can be like, you know, the perfect this, the perfect that, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect broadcaster, like, you can't. It's just, you don't have that in you. You just got to, I had to learn that I can't be great at everything. I can be good at a lot of things. But the most important job to me was being a mother, is being a mother, because I don't get a second shot at that. So I think my goals really changed a lot when I had Coakley. He's 4, so it was 4 years ago. I didn't know what was going to happen, because I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Everything's going to remain the same. Like, I'm going to do better. I want that national gig. And then when you have this baby and he's up all night. You have to worry about getting daycare and sitters, and, you know, you're exhausted. But then you're worried about like, I have to interview Sam Darnold. I have to do this. I have to do that. And you're like, you can't keep it all together. So I'm very fortunate. SNY has been fantastic. They let me be a mom. They let me be a reporter. They let me do what I need to do. But there are things I had to give. I can't go on some of the trips that I would love to go on, or do some of these features that I would love to do it. And I have to ask for help. I have to ask people to help me. I need people to come watch my kid. I need we have a wonderful nanny. She's actually with my daughter right now. She's so flexible. Scott's great. Scott will change his schedule to work around my schedule. And as you know, Scott's a basketball coach, so our schedules really don't mix. So it's just kind of each day, you take it day by day. And I know it's very cliche. It's kind of like a sport. You have a game plan, you know, you have a playbook, and the playbook doesn't always go as planned, but you have that basic, you know, what you need to do. But it's hard. It really is hard. But at the end of the day, like I said, if I got to succeed in one thing in life, it's going to be being a mom.
That's amazing. And, you know, me being where I'm at in my life right now, I'm obviously not married. I don't have children, but I want that someday. And it's encouraging to look at women who are able to do both. And, you know, a lot of times women especially, we talk about it a lot. Actually, Molly McGrath for ESPN, I follow her on Twitter, and I recently saw that she was receiving a lot of negative comments about her being pregnant and being on the field, still doing her job. And I'm curious, have you ever experienced any type of negativity that at some point maybe brought you down, or just negativity in general?
Oh yeah. Well, being pregnant, it's not easy. And being on camera makes it even worse. I mean, I gained 50 pounds with both my children. And I worked with Coakley. I hosted a show April 17th on a Sunday, and I gave birth to Coakley April 18th that morning. Oh my
goodness, that's incredible.
So I literally worked up into the day I gave birth. And finding clothes that fit you when you're pregnant and you're not on TV is hard enough. So I was maternity dresses are hard. I mean, everything is hard. Your ankles swell. There's everything. And I would get emails saying, you shouldn't be wearing that. You should be embarrassed. You look huge. You look fat. Like, you need to start working out again. And it was hard. And then with Cora, I had her in July. So I worked all the way up. I did OTAs, I did stuff. And
which is not easy.
And the summertime, being pregnant. So you have to being on air, I had to wear shorts sometimes. And I struggled with it. I still struggle with, losing that baby weight. And then after giving birth, Olivia, that's when I struggled the most, because you go back on air and you still have that baby weight. And then you're still full with all these emotions, and you get all these people tweeting you, and you see all these celebrities that have lost like their baby weight, like a week after they gave birth. And it's like, that's not real life.
Yeah, it's not. It's not realistic.
So I was proud of Molly McGrath, and I'm glad she said, you grew a human inside of you. I don't see men can't do that.
They can't.
If you want to judge me, if a man wants to judge me because I have a little baby weight, or I'm not wearing the appropriate maternity dress that he doesn't like, well, you go try to grow a child. You do that yourself in your body for 40 weeks, because it's not 9 months. It's actually 10 months.
It's so crazy too. It's unfortunate the day and age that we live in with social media. Everybody just has such immediate access to everyone and everything. And
you have to have thick skin. You have to have thick skin in this business as a female. I'm sure you get all the time, Olivia. People aren't going to like you, and that's fine. But I struggled hard. And we have brothers. I had 2 brothers, so they prepared me for anything. Anything you said to me, my brothers probably did it worse. They protected me. So it was hard though, being pregnant. I struggled with that and having the negative connotations, because I couldn't help my body changing. I couldn't help that.
And it's a really, really incredibly beautiful thing. None of us would be here today if it were not for mothers. So I think in this day and age,
that's why I used to write to men when they would say, I'm like, I hope someone didn't tell your mother that when they were, growing you.
It's very true. And I think, thankfully, as the world, as we continue to grow, I think people are becoming more supportive and more respectful in some ways, but also in some ways, you always are going to have the trolls. But I think it's important to have these conversations. I think it's important for women to be able to look at other women who have both and have been able to talk about the struggles, because for whatever it's worth, from the outside looking in, it always looked like you were very happy, very, excited to be there. You were always on point. So I could never tell if that's how you're feeling on the inside. I could never tell.
Yeah, it was like I said, and again, I had my children later in life. I love being in my 20s, and I had them in my late 30s. And a lot of it was the business. A lot of it was just, finding the right person doing. So everybody's on their own journey and their own path. I mean, some women will have babies and not come back to their job, which that's fine. Some women only do part-time. Some women are back 2 weeks later on the national stage, and that's awesome too. So we all just have to appreciate being a mother and what it means to that person, and how you can have it all, your all. Because like I said, you really don't have it all, but I can have my all, the way I shape what I want.
Yeah, which I think is, again, super beautiful. We're gonna leave on a positive note before I let you go. What is one piece of positive advice or encouragement you can provide to even younger women, especially coming into the broadcast industry, that want to have all of it? Like you said, you can't be great at everything, but you can have all of what you see as your own little world.
That's a good question. I think I'd have there's 2 pieces of advice I would give. The first is, don't be afraid to fail. You are making your own path, And no matter what you do or how you're trying, you're going to fail. And that is okay. You got to learn from it and grow from that failure. I have failed so many times since being a mother, and I'm going to continue to fail, but I've learned from it and I've grown from it. And then also just be yourself. Like I said before, everybody's on their own journey. Everybody's writing their own book. Like I'm writing my own book. I'm writing Jeané Coakley, mother, wife, sportscaster. That's my book and that's my journey. And it's not the same as yours, Olivia. It's not the same as, my best friends, Michelle Yu's in the business, Sarah Kustak's in the business, Dionne Miller, Elise, and then one more piece of advice. I have 3, okay?
No, keep
because
going.
I've named these women. You have to surround yourself with strong women and strong friends, because without that group and clan around you, protecting you, and, calling my friend Dionne, who's a mother of 2, who's a football reporter in Chicago. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I supposed to do with my children? Like the Jets just, had breaking news and I don't know what to do with my children. Or my friend Elise, who, just left the business because her husband got another job and she had to move cross country and wants to be back in the business and has a 2-year-old. Or Sarah, who, who doesn't have any children, but is trying to figure out, so I just surround yourself with strong women in this business who support you and you support them.
That's absolutely incredible advice. Jeané Coakley, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the YorkHER podcast presented by Visa. An incredible conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. And you keep doing your thing, girl. You're awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's a wrap on another episode of the YorkHER podcast presented by Visa. Thank you so much for sticking by my side each week and listening to all of our incredible guests. SNY's Jeané Coakley, I've known her for 4 years now. Go support her work and listen and share and subscribe to the podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks for joining me, guys. I'll see you next week.